Hi there, folks. My name is Emily.
And I'm Ilt.
And this is Oh My Word, a podcast where we discuss the content of books, movies, musicals, TV shows, etc., so that you have a little bit of advanced warning before you waste your time for 7 hours during a break week watching Netflix.
Yes. Also, so that you don't have to waste 7 hours trying to figure out what the content is all about, we have a very special pearl clutching scale for violent language and romance, scale of 0 to 4, 0 being the best and 4 being the worst. Because that's how it goes. And all you gotta do is give a quick glance and you say, oh, what numbers do they give them? Oh, is this really something that I want to be engaging in? Yes or no? And then you decide.
It's sort of like a totem pole. People always say, you know, you're at the top of the totem pole, but in fact, totem poles, the bottom was like the place of importance, and the top, you got less important as you got to the top. So same with our rating. 0 is actually better than 4. So we just flipped it on its head.
Right. That is a rather interesting metaphor.
Thank you. Maybe it's not matched perfectly well, but I feel like I did an okay job, kind of like the mismatched romance in the TV show we're talking about today, which in fact is called Mismatched.
Oh, wow. How did they come up with a name like that?
You know, if they had gone star-crossed, I feel like maybe it would have been too on the nose. You know, they had to maybe they had to update it a little bit because star-crossed, people don't really know what that means. I think a lot of people actually think star-crossed means like, you know, like stars in their eyes, like perfect love. But star-crossed means like their stars don't align, so it wouldn't work out.
I have no idea where you come up with these things. Oh, maybe I think it's an intergalactic term for sci-fi romances.
Oh, maybe. Could be. That's the other option. Anyway, we are talking about Mismatched, which is a Netflix adaptation of a book called When Dimple Met Rishi by Sandhya Menon. Basically, Rishi, who's this Indian kid, 18, so he's a guy, I guess, wants this rom-com type life, like perfect romance. And then there's Dimple, who only cares about her apps and becoming like the next Bill Gates, but Indian female version. I mean, it's a rom-com, so all the things that go along with that, you know, boy meets girl, boy doesn't quite get girl, boy gets girl, boy loses girl, you know, it's the whole thing, but they're teenagers, 18 and 17, or at least in the TV show, and it sort of is a gender switch, right? Because usually, like, the girl is I shouldn't say usually, there's a lot of ones where the boy's the romantic and the girl is like, I'm focused on my career, or I'm just not ready for love right now. But it does change things a little bit, and it's set in India, so there's a lot of Indian cultural norms, which we'll get into, but that they bring into the show. Our ratings are violence, 0. She does throw coffee in his face when they first meet, but it's cold coffee, and that's really the extent of violence. There's no bullying or beating up like there are in a lot of teen shows. So violence is a 0. Language is a 4. And we'll have to talk about this a little bit more, but they curse a lot, and it doesn't really fit. Really, like sometimes cursing, it's too much, but at least the character's mouth that it's coming out of, like it could be a mobster and you're like, this is too much cursing, but I understand why you're saying it. This is just, it's too much and it doesn't fit and it feels awkward. And then romance is a 3.5. There's not super, I mean, the whole thing is a romance, so there's that. And then we do see Dimple's roommate in bed with a guy. We don't see details, but they are in bed, so that's fairly overt sexuality, so that bumps it up to a 3.5. The only reason it's not a 4 is because it'd have to be like HBO level stuff to be a 4, right? We'd have to actually see things.
Yeah, so it's funny. We have for our romance, we have HBO level. For our violence, we have Tarantino level. What do we have for language? What language for language?
Like, oh, that's a good question.
Oh, I'll tell you. Language should be who's the guy who does the guy who did Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. That guy's a language guy.
I don't know.
I'm blanking on the director's name now. I know who he is. He just did The Gentleman or something like that. really fast-paced films, actions, like really twisted stories that somehow like come back. And we apologize that we forget your name, but he would be the language guy because the word those guys, like every other word is just they're swearing. Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's true. This also, there are certain times where you're like you sometimes feel like they sound like a kid who just learned a bad word.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's what it sometimes feels like. So like they put it into so like a kid who just learns a bad word finds a way to use it a lot. And you're like, or like finds weird places to stick it in. And you're like, why are you swearing right now? Like, what are you doing? Yeah. I don't know if it's also, like sometimes when it's not your language, the word doesn't seem like such a bad swear word, right? Which goes back to our whole thing about when there's a fantasy world, you should just make up a word for your swear words. So that way, for the reader, it's not like a bad word, even though in that world it's a bad word. It doesn't mean anything to us because it's not our language, it's totally made up. But here it's like, I mean, half the show is in English, even though they filmed it in India. It was an Indian company who filmed it. So I don't even know what's going on with that. So
I wonder I would love to know if that's how people talk. Is there some sort of, not Spanglish, obviously, Indianish or Anglian or whatever you would call the two combined? Like, especially in maybe this group of people, because they're going to a tech course. So maybe they're a little bit more like westernized, or especially, I mean, England was in India for a long time, so maybe a lot of people talk that way, or maybe that was just for Netflix, but it was incongruous because you're reading the subtitles and you need the subtitles there, but every once in a while you don't, because what the subtitle is, it's exactly, they've just spoken a whole sentence in English.
Yeah. And they sound very fluent in English. It's not like, you're not like, stop trying to do that. You can't even speak the language. Like their English is great. So
yeah. Though it's interesting. They use so maybe that's why the cursing sounds a little bit weird, because it's like Indian, English curse word, Indian. So that's weird. But they also, I noticed they call each other like man, bro, dude, a lot. Yeah. And there are people who talk like that in the US, especially, California, or like certain types of people, but it feels, and bub, like one of the girls calls her friend bub a lot. And I feel like that's, when you pick up things from other languages, you pick up certain things that maybe it's not like so common where the language is normally spoken, but for some reason it becomes a thing with you. Cause a lot of that sounded like it's not exactly how people talk here, but it works over there for whatever reason.
Right. Yeah. It almost sometimes feels like they could be like that you're trying too hard, or you're trying to put in too much slang or too much of the cursing. Like, what did the script look like? Was the script written in two languages? Like, I guess it had to be. You had to have Indian and English.
I guess what we'd have to do is we'd have to watch other Indian shows that are like really just Indian shows and see if, like, do they also speak in this mix of languages, or is it because this is a Netflix show and it's for teens, so were they trying to bring in more English? I've never watched an Indian show before, so I have no frame of reference for...
And it's not Bollywood style, the way that
right.
Like the kind of, like the stereotype of Bollywood of like massive casts and big colors and songs and or whatever. It's not like that. It almost seems like actually pretty low budget.
It feels like every other Netflix, like teen rom-com, either movie or TV show that we've watched, pretty much in terms of like the different kinds of characters and how everything's filmed, except that it happens to be in India.
And to the gender, so that also does affect certain things, like back to the gender switch thing. They kind of, the guy's the one who wants the rom-com life, like that Rishi just wants a perfect kind of romance. Like they show a little bit about his family, whatever. And Dimple is like, oh, career only, and da-da-da. They even gave Rishi, like, his best friend is gay. Well, she's lesbian. It's a girl. She's a lesbian. Which I guess part of that, so there's two parts to that. Part of it could just be to, like, automatically exclude her from the equation. Right? Because we see that they have, like, a very close relationship. But, like, we'll know they're not going to get together because they're, like, we know for sure they're not into each other in that kind of way. Like, so there is, I guess there could be something, I don't know if this is in the book or not, but if this would be the whole thing with the girl, because I guess in India, I don't know, it seems to be, we're not experts on the culture, but it seems like she's very much hiding it, right? And she's very much, if anyone finds out about it, going to be forced into an arranged marriage because that's what they do to girls like me sort of thing. So she does eventually get out, and it's like I said, like the worst thing, and everything just falls apart when that happens. So, like, if that would be an American show, she would be like, there would be a parade in her honor, you know? So,
Right.
that is a little bit, but it's also like, you know, it's also like the cliche of like, usually the girl has the gay guy best friend who like guides her and gives her the makeover and all that kind of stuff. And here it's like the guy now has the gay, well, she's a girl best friend. But the other thing about this also, which, okay, Rishi is just like this really sweet guy, but it's also sometimes you want to just smack him and tell him to like grow a backbone or like to stiffen up. He's always apologizing. He's running after Dimple even when she does not treat him well because he's just so head over heels with her, whatever. Which I guess has to be for the story, right? The whole thing. But like he's always apologizing and he's always like whatever, and he has a moment of like, okay, I'm going to prove you wrong, da da da, whatever, and then he ends up like falling at like wanting to drop the course anyways. It's just. He doesn't feel like he's not a guy. Like, he is a guy, but he's not a guy. Like, there's no toughness to him. Which is kind of like, I mean, it's great for him to be sweet and all that, but it's like, come on, if you're not going to stand up for anything and root for yourself, then, like, why am I rooting for you? You get mad for girls like that also, right? Someone who's just, like, a pushover kind of person. And then Dimple, it's also, she almost goes a little bit too over with her, like, so they show, like, part of her that she's all career-based and whatever is that, so she's very driven, right? And because as a woman trying to make it, that she has to be like extra, I guess you could say hard and extra determined and extra everything else. And we know she's so smart and we know she's so whatever, but it also means the expectations from her are higher and all that kind of stuff. I think like the professor tells her coding is genius and, you know, but I want you to be doing, but you're like, yeah, but I'm not going to let you get away with something that's not also genius because you're so good at what you're doing. So you have that, so there's that aspect about Dimple, but then there's also like, She also sometimes comes across as like being harsh and cold, and she's so like singly focused on her apps, like she does not pay attention to people, but somehow she still like makes friends. Like her roommate somehow like befriends her because she's like, oh, I like it that you're not like a pushover sort of thing, but she's also like not nice, Dimple. So like, I don't know, why would that automatically? Like Rishi yells at her like, you don't pay attention to people, you're so stuck in your phone and da 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 whatever. And then she's like, see, this is what happens when I care about people. I just get hurt or da-da-da. Instead of saying like, oh, you know, this is what happens when I spend so long in the app that when I turn around, I have no one left to stand around me. Like, there's no one left to support me because I pushed everybody away and I made no friends. And she has like her female idol who's like a big tech person or whatever. And the professor, well, the teacher of the course does not like this woman. Like he keeps telling her like, get a new idol, right? Get a new idol.
Yeah.
And she just, you know, she bucks that. And finally someone says to her, like, why do you think he doesn't like her? She stole his idea for something or other and then something happened. And Dimple's like, no, she would never do that. You're lying. And da-da-da, you know, and just totally rejects it. Which, if this is really her idol, like, wouldn't she know that either there were rumors about something like this? Like, why does it seem like she's so... It seems like she's living, even if she rejects the rumors, she would know that the rumors exist, right? You would think that the response would be like, oh, those are just rumors because they want to take her down. Like, she doesn't have to accept the fact, she doesn't have to accept if she's told that her idol had stolen something, but you think that if it was her idol, that she would know everything about her, right? And when the guy says, oh, he stole the design, she's like, no, she would never do that, whatever, instead of the reaction you would think would be like, oh yeah, I've heard those rumors, but they're totally not true. Right, that people are just jealous of her, and that's why they're spreading rumors. Right, which it's still her being hard-headed, but it makes sense. Instead of just like, no, she would never, and as if she's never heard of this stuff before. So it just makes her so blinded with her blinders, almost. Like, you don't think she's someone who's actually going to listen, or like consider what someone else has to say, or like, it's almost like the protective shell that she built around herself is a little bit too efficient, but it makes her also harder to root for as a character. Like, I don't remember... Like you have to see her doing like some sort of act of kindness or some sort of something, you know, that reminds us that her character is not only this singularly focused.
Some vulnerability.
Yeah. Or just something that shows that she's still human underneath her like apps, you know, and all of her coding. So you have a moment. The only times we ever see it is when like she gets homesick or she whatever. So it's all like it's all about her. And then the first day she comes, when she's finally allowed... Oh, so the whole reason why she's allowed to go to this course is because her mother's trying to arrange a marriage for her. And Dimple doesn't want to have to deal with it. She doesn't have to anything. That's even the first thing that we see from her. She's supposed to be going to a party, and she like puts on like the ugliest makeup possible. And because she's like being defiant about it. And her mom was like, you cannot leave the house like that. So you could see anybody who's not interested doing that. So like that like moment is like... But then like I started wondering, I was like, what party are they going to? Like, is this a relatives party that they're going to? So now she's like... she doesn't even like go to the like. I don't know if they explain like what the party is. Like, is it because so now you're not going to support whoever you need to support, or was it like a random person party that your mother's just thinking she was going to find a guy at, right? Because that's different.
Yeah, you're right. That wasn't very clear. It was just, I mean, there's definitely something that should be meeting someone there. People should be seeing her in the hopes that someone might set her up with someone.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly, yeah.
Right. So she does, her mother finally lets her go to the course because she knows that Rishi is going to be there. And Rishi's family had shown interest in Dimple, but they didn't realize that Dimple had nothing, they didn't know anything about this. So it's kind of like a behind the back arranged marriage situation, which is where all the misunderstandings come from, whatever. So you see her the first day she gets there, she's so excited, she's like very friendly to people. You know, there's a woman in the course, I think who's in her 40s, and she's like, oh, if you ever need anything, you could talk to me, whatever. So that's a nice moment there, but because we don't see consistencies in those kinds of moments, it seems like, oh, her first day she's all excited, so she's being nice to people. But we don't see her like consistently. I don't know, that it could just be me, and maybe it was there, but the fact that it's not like sticking. And there's this guy there who's considered one of like the biggest gamers in India, right? His name is like Anmol, who's in a wheelchair. And she goes to him, and he's kind of friendly to her at first. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm a big fan of yours, you know, I watch your stuff, da-da-da, whatever. And you see he's kind of smiling, then she's like, oh, and by the way, and she's just blabbing. She's like, oh, and by I'm so sorry, I didn't know. And then all of a sudden you see like his whole face fall, because she's referencing the wheelchair, which, okay, I can understand that people make things like that, but I think today, especially it could just be an American thing, like you don't say that to someone. Like, you do not say to someone, like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Like, there is, I guess also it's part of, like, the whole, like, able-bodied, or whatever, you know, differently abled movement, is that there is no pity, as far as, I don't use the word pity. We don't do that to people. We don't do the, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. We might say, like, oh, like, I don't know, there might be, what happened to you, or whatever, but there's no, like, I don't know, there's no, oh, sorry, I didn't know. It's so degrading. It's so, and also, like, well, we don't know, right? They don't tell us what happened to him. We don't know if he was born like that. We don't know if he was always like that. We see him, they do a much better job on. He ends up being like a big bully and someone who's just like not a nice person. But they do show us a moment where he's trying to get himself back into a wheelchair, and we see him struggling and how frustrated that makes him and how upset he is with that. And we get it. Like, you're still a jerk, but we understand why you're a jerk. Like, even you have like his partner for making the app. She's like, oh, he wants to make this one game and whatever, and the person said it's a stupid idea for an app, so they're not going to make it. And you know, they're going to make this other idea for an app. But she's like, look, I don't mind making his idea for an app because he wants to play this game that allows him to run or da-da-da, whatever. So like which is also much nicer, but we get it. We get it much more than Dimple, who's just like, also, this is someone who you're a big fan of. How do you not know? Like, so people have not seen him in public before? Like, have you never seen a public appearance of his? Like, how do you not know? So that's why Dimple just keeps coming across as someone who, because she's so singularly focused, and you're like, oh, that's the point. You're so focused, so she's not paying attention to people, but it's almost like too much.
I see what you're saying. I mean, you saw more episodes than I did, because I only saw the first 3. But I felt like, okay, yeah, she shouldn't say, sorry, I didn't know. But also the fact that he totally turns on her and the friend, like...
Yeah, it's very drastic. Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't call him a bad name or anything. I mean, it's still a nice gesture. You know, she was awkward. It was awkward, but like, it wasn't a mean thing to do. It wasn't a bad thing to do. It was just an awkward thing. And then he like, and everyone in the class turns on her because she's the know-it-all. And, you know, she's like the Hermione of the class. So she's not, you know, she's annoying, but
she's also middle class instead of upper class. That's a big thing because all the class systems in Indian culture. So they do also because I think most of the people there are upper class kids. Not all of them. There's another one who's not, but she also keeps it a secret that she like has to work odd jobs to kind of pay her way. So
gotcha.
You do have a lot of class stuff there.
Yeah, when she's leaving for school, her parents put her on the bus, and the dad says, don't worry, if you need money, you can always ask me. But the mom says something like, but only ask for like middle class amounts. Like, you know, there's a certain amount that's acceptable, which was an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting Indian cultural facets, like even the gender stuff with the marriage and the expectations, you know, because the grandmother is trying to set up Rishi, and she's like basically helping him on Tinder or whatever. Like, the version is that he's actually using, you know, to look at girls. But they have this whole talk about it. So Rishi really wants this fairy tale marriage because his grandparents had it, but his dad and his mom divorced. So, I mean, there's an explanation for why he wants something better in his life, like he wants a romance that lasts. But the grandmother says, you meet someone young because you want to date for a few years before you get married. So it's not like hitching you up, have kids this second. The process takes time, so that's why you're starting early. It is similar, maybe, to like some cultures within the US in terms of marriage, but it does have a different feel, which I guess is why like if this were an American story about an American girl who's so focused on her career and a boy who wasn't, it'd be like, maybe if it was 1972, this would be a forward-thinking movie, but it's 2021 and that story is not new. Like, there are plenty of women who pursue careers and plenty of men who want relationships. We've been told this story, we see it in real life, no big deal. But maybe it is a little bit more groundbreaking in India. Yeah. Maybe there's still more tradition of gender roles and what age you get married. And also it seems like parents and extended family are more involved, whereas here, a lot of times it's just up to the two people, right? I mean, they're probably going to introduce their family if they're close, but they're not necessarily asking for their parents' like permission or advice or anything like that,
Right. Well, another thing is that Rishi's parents are divorced, and he hides it because he wants to have this portrayal kind of for the perfect life sort of thing, which also, if it would be an American thing, unfortunately, divorce is so common. Like, it wouldn't be a hiding. It would just be like, it would be known. Like, it wouldn't be...
Yeah.
It wouldn't, like, factor in. But here it actually factors in very much into the relationship. So, that's one more thing. So, last thing, when they're going... They have this assignment. They have to go take photos of something, in the city or whatever it is. And Dimple and Rishi have this, like, moment where, like, they're setting up their shots and whatever. And so, Rishi says something and Dimple's like, oh, yeah, you come from your perfect life and your perfect whatever. And Rishi's just like... He just kind of nods, like, yep. Like, oh, yeah, that's totally me, perfect life. And then by the end of it, when she finds out that his parents are divorced and like whatever, she's all mad at him. Like, you lied to me. How come? Why? Like, I don't even care what what your parents' situation is. I just care that you lied to me, that or whatever. And it's like, do you not remember that you rushed into this assumption about him? Like, she totally bulldozed him in his in making this assumption about him, and she gets mad at him for lying. Like, why do you think he felt like? Why would you think he would feel like ready or open to tell you when you made that total bulldozed assumption about him, and then you get mad at him for lying? Like,
that's
no,
true.
Sorry, like Dimple, you're wrong in this one because you made the assumption and you shut it down, like you were not listening to him. I don't know. You always want people for like things to be good for characters and whatever, but these two characters, they both need a kick in the butt.
Well, they're young. I don't know if that excuses it. I don't know. It's interesting. It's sort of, I think the thing that was most interesting to me, but also not least interesting, was that it did just feel like an American story that happened to be in India. And I know you said the book is different, right? In the book, she Dimple is in America, so it is a different story. It's about her coping or like learning about American cultural norms and the things she wants, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe actually there's just more similarities, especially in certain classes of people in India and the United States. So it is like stories would be similar. And it's probably because it's Netflix. Like Netflix just does their teen rom-coms in a certain way, so it doesn't feel like... It was cute. It was in India. It was interesting, but it also wasn't really different from other things we've seen.
Yeah, that's basically what there's to say about it.
Yeah.
25 minutes later. That's all we've got to say.
Well, we could go longer. I'm sure if we really wanted to talk more about it, we could go into like color palettes and costume choices. But we won't do that because we actually don't really know anything about color palettes or costume choices. So you don't really want to hear us talk about that at all.
We should create our own color palette. That's what we should do.
Like new colors?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to figure out what the parameters of our color palette's going to be. Like different kinds of what's usually out there.
Okay. You know what? I think I have some swatches from Home Depot, so we could maybe start mixing and then we could put it up on the wall. Okay, I could get into this.
Well, it's that or we're going to end up in a pain fight. So either way, it'll be fun.
Ooh. That's like when we talked about Community last week.
Oh, yeah, that's right. All right, much to look forward to.
Yes. All right. Thanks so much for listening, folks. We'll catch you next time.
Cheers, people. Oh My Word podcast is brought to you by the Pearl Clutching Basement Dwellers at Oh My Word. Follow us on Instagram for updates at Oh My Word Podcast, or like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For full episode notes and details, visit eltenenbaum.com. Music is by Tim Berg. See you next time.